All right. Well, thank you everyone for joining us. I'm Becky Thompson with Nania Energy, and joining me is Seth Crackel. And we're going to be discussing a pretty important change to electricity budgets today. So with that, we'll go ahead and kick off. So over the next few minutes, we're going to be discussing what has changed with ComEd's charges, what that impact is going to be to your bottom line at your school district. But we're not going to leave you hanging. We're going to share some ways of what you can do to minimize those cost impacts for now, but also going forward. So let's kick off by first talking about ComEd delivery charges and how they are different from supply charges. So you may have Constellation or NG or someone like that that bills you monthly for your electricity charges, and you have a fixed supply rate. What we are going to be talking about ad nauseum today, excuse me, is actually separate from those supply charges. You are also subject to ComEd delivery charges, which may come on your supplier invoice each month. It's a subsection below your fixed supply cost. And these are the local utility charges that ComEd issues to pay for transmission lines, to pay for energy efficiency programs, and to make sure that when you turn on your light switch, you have power. And so these are agnostic to what supplier you have, whether you purchase through a third-party supplier or ComEd directly, you are subject to these same charges each month. And they may come to you, like I mentioned before, on your supplier invoice, or they may come from ComEd directly if you are dual billed. So you may have a supplier invoice that comes for just your fixed supply that matches the terms of your fixed supply agreement. And then you may receive a ComEd invoice separately. So what's so important about this is that even if you have a fixed supply contract in place, you are subject to these changes that ComEd has been issuing and are likely already feeling the effects pretty greatly on your current budget. So let's dive into what this means. Here is a snapshot of what some of these delivery charges from ComEd look like. And you can see there's quite a few there. It's a little overwhelming at first. But what we're really going to focus on today is the carbon-free resource adjustment, which is a relatively new line item from your delivery charges portion of your bill. This came as part of the Climate Equitable Jobs Act that Governor Pritzker signed into law a few years ago. Some of you may be taking advantage of solar as a part of that CEJA Act. But as part of that legislation, it actually included a subsidy program for nuclear generation plants downstate for a term of 5 years. So this actually just started a couple of years ago, and we're going to be participating in this as ComEd customers through 2027. And the basic concept of this legislation was that nuclear generation is really expensive to maintain and run and keep going. As most of you know, electricity doesn't just naturally exist, it has to be generated. In years past, we heavily relied on coal for the majority of our generation. We're moving away from that and now heavily rely on natural gas. But we still have a pretty heavy reliance on those fossil fuels for electric generation. So as a backup plan, having nuclear generation available is a pretty good kind of arrow to have in our quiver. Especially since nuclear generation is very expensive to build new. It takes decades to do, and we're not seeing a lot of new coming online. The state has a vested interest to kind of keep it going, but to do so, since it's so expensive to run versus natural gas, we have to subsidize them to keep them going. And it's an unfortunate cost that we as consumers have to kind of take on the burden for, but the state has deemed it necessary for that additional grid reliance, and so that when we want to turn on our air conditioners, we have enough juice to go around for everyone. So as part of that, when it first came out, when this program first started in 2022, electricity prices had doubled year over year. It was something like 11 cents a kilowatt hour, which is just crazy for supply. And so actually, when this program first started, the language for this legislation was bilateral. So the nuclear plants actually had to subsidize us as the end consumers and issued a credit on all of our ComEd bills for several months to the tune of over 4 cents per kilowatt hour. And that is a massive credit. That is 40 or 50% of your total bill each month was taken care of via this credit. So I likely venture to guess that if you were to look at your 22 and 23 fiscal budgets, your electricity probably came in far under what was projected. And it's directly related to this massive credit that kind of came out of nowhere. But then what happened was that this has kind of an inverse relationship to energy prices. As energy rates came back down in ComEd, this credit went from a sizable credit, a negative number on your invoice, to now being a charge. So within 2 years, this line item on our invoices is about 6.5 cents different per kilowatt hour than what it used to be. 6.5 cents makes up your entire probably supply only budget. So probably 50% of your electricity budget a year. That's what this change is equivalent to. So it's massive. And ComEd, I think, didn't do a really great job of illustrating this or communicating this. They did mail out communications to all ComEd customers, and a lot of suppliers, even we here at NNEA, tried to let everyone know about it. But a tricky little part of this legislation allows for ComEd to change this carbon-free resource adjustment monthly. It is a drastic change to budgets. There's not a whole lot that you can do from a regulatory fixed rate perspective because this comes straight from ComEd. But like I mentioned, this could have hundreds of thousands of dollars of impact for the larger high school districts. I'm seeing where it's like $1 million change from 2022 to 2024 just from this single line item. So I put here, to plan conservatively in the budgets and things that we're doing, we're estimating 2.5 cents of a charge per kilowatt hour to account for this line item for future planning. But we really don't know what it's going to be. If energy prices do increase this summer as expected, then this charge should come back down and may even be a credit again. But the unfortunate part of it is we just don't know. And with ComEd reserving the right to change it every month, we're kind of at the mercy of what the market does, unfortunately. But it's really important, and we want to make sure that everyone on the call is aware of this. So you're planning your budget to incorporate this change rather than just looking at years past and adding on a few percentage points and guessing that your costs will be relatively the same. This has been a massive change in the last 2 years.
Spoiler alert, or maybe takeaway alert. If you get nothing else from our conversation today, Becky just mentioned this, but I really want to drive home the fact that it's that you need to plan accordingly, right? So this is going up, or it's went up. It looks like it's going to stay up at least for the foreseeable future, and you need to be properly accounting for that in your energy budget, so that you're not, kind of blowing your operating budget by having, tens of thousands or more in additional costs that you weren't anticipating. So this is really the time to reach out to whoever you work with, whether that's directly with a third-party retail supplier or a consultant like us, and have us help you do the most accurate forecasting that you can. So once again, that you're not blowing that operating budget with these increases that are happening.
Yeah, that's a great point, Seth. I actually just did this for every school district that I work with. Whether they asked for a budget or not, I provided one to them because, like I mentioned, I've been doing this almost 12 years. And you can see the electric cost column here and the delivery charges and taxes. It's the first time in my career that I've ever seen where the delivery and charges and taxes are greater than the supply cost. And so that's definitely something that people should be aware of and plan for. And there are modeling softwares and things out there that whoever you work with should be able to provide those to you, so you're not trying to guesstimate what utility charges will be. So now that we've shared the what and the why this is happening, and hopefully given you some insights as to how to plan for it, at least in your upcoming budget, so that you're hopefully we're conservative and things level back out, and maybe it comes back down, and then you'll be under budget. That's best case scenario, right? But in the event that that doesn't happen, really we're seeing this shift driven by the upgrading of the grid and the infrastructure, the push to renewables, the electrification of fleets. we are seeing significant permanent changes in how energy is used, consumed, and demanded of our grid and infrastructure, probably forever. So some of the things that we unfortunately have to get comfortable with are some of these changes and increases and that shifting around. And so we thought it might be helpful to share some of the ways to minimize that total budget impact now for the immediate fiscal year, but also into the future as we expect these changes to continue or even worsen. So we'll go through each of these in a little more depth. But we did want to share, the cheapest kilowatt hour of power is the one you never have to buy, the one you never use. So efficiency measures or lowering those operating costs via your consumption is really going to be the name of the game going forward, especially as your supply portion that you can fix and affect becomes the lesser significant piece of your total budget. So starting off with competitive supply, regardless of what you've been doing in the past, I think it's always good to give a refresher that in Illinois, there's no public RFP bidding requirements. There's no lowest responsive bidder, no need to post in the newspaper, anything like that for utilities. Reason being that you used to only have one option of whom to purchase from, and there are many parts of the state that still only have one utility to purchase from. So you're not required to have competitive supply. And because of that, we do run into quite a few districts who continue doing what they've always done, path of least resistance, and I completely appreciate that. But the introduction of competition into the marketplace when it comes to fixing your supply costs is becoming more and more relevant and important. Wherever you can kind of squeeze out the pennies when we're getting charged dollars on the other end has become of the utmost importance and a priority for many of those districts who previously maybe hadn't engaged in that. There's a lot of flexibility out there if you have not done this before. Your contract length, the type of product, how you fix the supplier that you choose. There are a lot of different ways to approach this that fits your district specifically to account for any upcoming efficiency projects you're doing. If you're looking into on-site solar, if you're building a new building, you're renovating, you're adding air conditioning, there's a lot of different things that you can do to accommodate your specific goals while still introducing that competition, because competition drives down costs. And the long and short of it is that we're talking about electricity here. At the end of the day, barring that all suppliers' contracts are equal, their juice is the same juice no matter whose name is on the invoice. It still comes through to your light switch when you turn it on, and it doesn't have any different quality effect, assuming again that those contracts are favorable and that language is favorable to you. So bringing in as much competition as you can to get you the best rate for that commodity is going to serve you quite well. And there's several ways that you can do that. You can purchase through the utility directly. I wouldn't recommend that in today's marketplace, just with the volatility we've had. But there's also retail energy suppliers, like you can purchase directly through. You can use a third-party consultant. You can purchase through a consortium. Whatever method that you choose, I would just recommend that you bring in as much competition as possible. And if the current path doesn't allow you to have options of supplier, ask why and ask for that to be an option.
So on-site solar is one of the best and really biggest ways to reduce your overall expense or cost for electricity. Really, the reason this is kind of so attractive to school districts in Illinois is the incentives there listed on the left-hand side are points 1, 2, 3, and 4. So just really quickly covering those. Net metering, that's the program that allows you to receive credits when you're generating more electricity than you can use on site. That then pushes that electricity back onto the grid. You get credits for that you can then utilize when you aren't producing as much. So kind of a summer versus winter seasonality to that. The federal incentives make up a big chunk of the overall project cost. A lot of that is due to the change in the investment tax credit that allows non-taxable entities like school districts to have a direct pay option for 30+% of that overall project cost. And then the state solar rec program is another huge chunk where the state of Illinois will actually buy those renewable energy certificates that you are getting from generating green power on site. You can essentially sell those back to the state, and the state will pay you for the first 15 years of those, what are known as SRECs. They pay you out quicker. That they actually pay out over the first 7 years of the project. And then finally, the ComEd rebates, that accounts for about 10 to 12% of the overall incentives. So once again, it's all of those things that added together that really get to 0.5 here, which is that simple payback or ROI, whatever you want to call that point where the project is essentially paid for itself and it is now saving you money. All of those things add together to really speed that process up, where it's a 3 to 5 year simple payback for most school districts within the ComEd territory. One other thing that I think is really worth talking about specifically is that not only are you reducing what you're buying in essentially in terms of electricity or offsetting on the supply side, but you're also able to affect or reduce the amount that you're paying for the delivery side. So any of those usage-based charges. So we're throwing this example up here again, the bottom, the electricity bill. So any of those, yeah, thank you, Becky. Any of those usage-based charges, anything with a kWh next to it, you're using less power coming from ComEd's wires, so you're not being charged for any of that electricity coming in, and then so you're effectively reducing those costs. And then one final point that I think is really worth noting here is that school districts are still subject to excise taxes, and this is one of the only ways to actually reduce that taxable amount or what you're paying in terms of those taxes is by reducing the amount of kilowatt hours that you're using. So it's no secret that on-site solar is not a fit for every single school district for whatever reason. Some districts just don't want to participate. And if you find yourself in that camp, that's when community solar can really allow you to kind of tap into the benefits of on-site solar, namely the reduction in what you're paying for electricity without having to actually install anything on site. You don't have to go through any construction project or anything like that. I've heard it said jokingly before, but it's true that this is one of the few times where your autograph when you sign the subscription contracts for community solar could be worth more than a famous person. Maybe LeBron James, maybe not Taylor Swift, but maybe Travis Kelce. So just a super quick overview on how community solar works is that you subscribe to a particular community solar farm. And then you end up getting credits on the electricity side of your bill, and then you actually do have an additional invoice from the community solar provider. But the credits that you receive on the utility electricity side are going to be greater than what you're paying the community solar provider. So the typical net discount to you is 10 to 12% in ComEd. So essentially for processing another bill or a couple of bills a month, you could be saving tens of thousands of dollars that, over the 20-year period that most community solar programs contracts are, could add up to hundreds of thousands of dollars or more.
Yeah, I think that community solar is it's relatively new and it's a little complex. Whenever I've had a community solar company explain it to me, I go glossy-eyed about halfway through. But as we're getting more people subscribed to it, the savings here are really tangible. They're much more immediate than on-site solar. Doesn't require that construction bid. And Seth, I thought you did an outstanding job of describing what it is. That 10 to 12% discount can apply to the entire invoice, including delivery charges that we talked about that are facing this massive increase. So this is a discount to your supply rate that you have, but also those ComEd delivery charges. So think about what 10 to 12% of your total electricity budget is for the year that you could secure by participating in one of these programs.
Yeah, excellent point, Becky. And one thing I forgot to mention before was that you can participate in community solar no matter who you're getting your electricity from. So, you could be getting it directly from ComEd. You could have a third-party retail supplier that's providing you with electricity. You could be part of a consortium. You can still participate in community solar.
Yeah. And we've actually seen where we've added this in to districts who are already doing on-site solar or already have on-site solar as well. So say they are a unit district and they installed solar on their high school, but their elementary school wasn't a good candidate. They're enrolling their elementary school into community solar for this discount program. So don't count yourself out. If you've not had a discussion about this with anyone, it's probably a relevant time to start thinking about that. All right, so a couple other ways here in our last few minutes together. I know that lighting is not a new concept to anyone on this call. I put it on here just to remind everyone that if this is still on your to-do list, LEDs reduce your electric usage that is required from your lighting by 80%. Paybacks are 1 to 2 years, and with energy costs continuing to increase, we're even seeing them quicker than that. So a lot of those incentives and rebate programs from ComEd are still very much alive and running when it comes to LEDs. And in ComEd especially, we have a very robust efficiency program that we actually pay into every month as one of those delivery charges. So it's one of the few ways you can get your money back from ComEd. But for school districts in particular, some of the partner programs allow them to fill out the applications on your behalf pro bono. They are compensated by ComEd directly to fill out those applications. All you have to do is align them with your project manager, your construction firm, your architect. They give them the plans, they give them the model numbers. You follow the application process, but you're getting significant dollars back that really help drive those ROIs. So if you've not done LED yet, arguably, this is probably where I would start, even before on-site solar, because it has the quickest payback and immediate effect on your consumption. And then this is a little bit different. So everything else we've talked about has really been kind of efficiency based. Demand response is a program that is an opportunity for schools to earn revenue for curtailing their usage and their demand on the grid in times of extreme demand. So typically on the hottest days of the year in the summer, the hours between 3 and 6 o'clock, when everyone's getting home and cranking down their air conditioning and there's a spike on the grid for how much demand we have, the grid, PJM, who is the overarching operator above ComEd, will compensate customers who sign up for these programs and agree to cut back their usage during these times of high demand, and then they'll issue you a check. This program has been revamped quite a bit over the last few years. It used to be that summertime was whenever we would put demand on the grid. But now as weather gets more unpredictable and a little splotchy during the winter, we've actually had a real event called, I think it was the day before Christmas Eve, back in 2024 or 2022, excuse me. So it was like over Christmas Eve was an event was called. So it's now a year-round program, which does create some heartburn for schools because you're obviously not going to risk your pipes being burst to turn down your heat to make a little extra money in the wintertime. But there are still some summer-only programs out there that exist. It's not as quite of a beautiful payback as it used to be, but it is a revenue earning potential program. And if our capacity costs in ComEd go back up, then this will become a fruitful program once again. So I just wanted to share it here. Again, many of you probably are participating in this in some form or fashion, but I wanted to mention it here as an opportunity to offset some of those cost increases that we're talking about. So with that, we'll wrap up. But the final takeaways from today are that costs are going up, just like they are for everything. Your transportation bid, your food service, everything is increasing, and energy is no different. The difference is that ComEd's costs are increasing. So regardless of where you stand from your fixed supply contract, you're going to want to account for this in your upcoming fiscal year budget for 24 and 25. Contact whoever your partner is to get those estimated budget numbers specific to your accounts so that you're not trying to kind of guess and pull it out of thin air. And really think about revisiting some of those efficiency projects and other programs we discussed to minimize that final cost impact to you. Thank you again for your time. Thank you for joining us today. And as always, feel free to reach out to us directly if there was anything that you wanted to follow up with.